Nathan had always lived a simple life. The small farm on the edge of the settlement was all he needed. It was quiet, peaceful, and far enough from the city to avoid the noise and chaos of the modern world. He had inherited the farm from his father, who had taught him everything he knew about the land, the animals, and how to grow the crops that fed the people of their small village. Life was predictable, and Nathan liked it that way. But that day, something changed. It had been a long day of work. Nathan was cleaning the barn when he noticed something strange. The air around him felt different, like the world itself had become still. The birds were quiet, and the usual sounds of the animals seemed to disappear. Nathan paused, listening carefully. Then he heard a faint rustling sound, as if something was moving just outside his barn. At first, Nathan thought it might be one of the farm animals. But then the rustling grew louder, more urgent, and something in the back of his mind told him it wasn't just a stray dog or a curious raccoon. He grabbed a nearby rake, his grip tightening around the handle. He wasn't afraid, but caution had always been part of his nature. Slowly, he walked toward the barn door, peeking out into the fading light of the evening. What he saw shocked him. A figure lay on the ground just outside the barn. It was like nothing Nathan had ever seen before. The creature was humanoid, but different. Her skin was a soft shade of purple that shimmered in the dim light, and her body was long and slender, yet muscular, as though built for strength. Her sharp features, though alien, were striking in their beauty. Her clothes were torn, stained with dirt and blood, and she seemed to be barely conscious. She was breathing heavily, her breaths ragged and shallow, as if she had been running for days without rest. Without thinking, Nathan rushed to her side. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice low but steady. He knelt beside her, his heart racing. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing sharp, golden irises that seemed to glow with a fierce intensity. She blinked, confused at first, but then her gaze focused on Nathan. For a long moment, neither of them moved. She studied him with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "Human," she whispered, her voice rough but clear. "You should not have helped me." Nathan frowned, unsure of what she meant. "You're hurt. You need help." The alien woman's lips parted slightly as if about to argue, but then she seemed to give in. Her eyes closed, and she slumped forward, unconscious. Nathan barely caught her in time, his arms wrapping around her fragile body as he lifted her carefully. He didn't know who or what this alien was, but instinct told him to help. He wasn't about to leave her out there to die. He carried her into the barn, his heart pounding as he made his way inside. The barn was warm and smelled of hay and animals. Nathan laid the stranger on a pile of soft straw, making sure she was comfortable before rushing to find water and food. As he moved about the barn, Nathan couldn't help but wonder who she was and where she had come from. He had heard stories of aliens, of course. Everyone on this planet knew about the stars beyond their world, but it was rare for any of them to actually visit. Most of the stories were about humans visiting other planets, not the other way around. This encounter was unlike anything Nathan had ever imagined. Minutes later, he returned with a bowl of water and some of the leftover bread from dinner. He knelt beside her, gently coaxing her to drink. Her eyes fluttered open again, and this time, she didn't look as weak. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have helped me," she said, her voice more stable now, though still strained. "My people. I was being hunted. I didn't expect anyone to care." Nathan's heart sank at her words. "Hunted? What do you mean? Why?" The alien woman hesitated, her golden eyes scanning his face as if weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. "I am a huntress from a distant world," she began. "My people, we are part of a clan that survives by hunting and fighting. But we are at war, and I was sent here to find food for my people. I was ambushed. My enemies, they left me for dead." Nathan listened, fascinated and horrified. He had heard of wars on distant planets, but to hear it from someone who had lived through it was something entirely different. This wasn't some far-off tale, this was real. "Why didn't you just fight back?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "I was alone. My weapons were lost in the attack, and I was too weak to fight back. I thought I would die alone on this planet. Nathan shook his head. Well, you're not alone anymore. I can help you. You're safe here, at least for now. The alien woman's eyes softened as she looked at him, a flicker of gratitude passing through her gaze. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Nathan shrugged, his expression calm. I just couldn't leave someone in need. It's the right thing to do. She stared at him for a moment, as if trying to figure him out. Then, she nodded slowly. Thank you, human. I will not forget this. As the night stretched on, Nathan stayed by her side, making sure she had enough food and water. He didn't ask many questions. She didn't offer many answers. But Nathan could see the weight of her past in her eyes, the pain of losing her people, the fear of being hunted. And despite the strange circumstances of their meeting, Nathan felt a strange sense of connection. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for sure. Things were about to change. The next few days passed slowly but steadily. Nathan had given the alien woman, Aurelia, time to rest, and each day she seemed to grow stronger. The bruises on her arms began to fade, and her sharp features, though still hardened by her past, softened with each passing hour. She still didn't talk much about where she came from or the war she had mentioned. But Nathan didn't press. He understood that trust wasn't something that could be given freely, especially when someone had been through what she had in the mornings. Nathan went out to tend to the farm. He had always enjoyed the routine, feeding the animals, checking the crops, and making sure the land was healthy. But now, he found himself looking over his shoulder often, wondering if Aurelia was okay inside the barn. Every time he returned to the farm, he was met with her bright, intense gaze, which had become a constant fixture in his life. She was quiet, but her presence was a reminder of how much his world had changed since that first night. One evening, after finishing his work for the day, Nathan decided to ask Aurelia more about herself. It had been days since their first conversation, and though she had been more open recently, she still kept much of her story to herself, sitting across from her in the dim light of the barn. Nathan broke the silence. You said you were a huntress. What exactly does that mean? You said you were from a clan. Aurelia's golden eyes flickered toward him, and for a moment, she hesitated. Her fingers traced the edge of the bowl in her hands, as if contemplating whether or not she should speak. Finally, she looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. My clan is not like yours. We don't live in cities or towns, she began, choosing her words carefully. We are warriors, travelers. Our way of life is simple. We hunt, we fight, and we survive. My people are spread across many worlds, living in harsh environments where only the strongest survive. Nathan listened intently, his curiosity growing. It sounds like you've been through a lot. Aurelia nodded slowly, her gaze turning distant. We've been at war for as long as I can remember. There are many factions, and we've been caught in the middle of it all. My people fight for survival, and we've lost much over the years. Nathan's heart went out to her. He had never experienced anything like that. The biggest struggles on his farm were the occasional bad crop or a stubborn cow to hear about. A lifetime of fighting for survival. It was almost unimaginable. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft. I can't even begin to understand what that must be like. Aurelia met his gaze, her eyes intense. You don't have to understand. You've helped me when you didn't have to. That means more than you think. She paused, looking down at her hands. But there's still something I don't understand. Why are you helping me? You've seen what I am. I'm not like you. I'm a warrior, an outsider. Most would turn away from someone like me. Nathan thought for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly as he searched for the right words. I don't see you as an outsider, he said slowly. I see someone who's been through a lot, someone who needs help. And well, I guess I've always believed that we're all the same underneath. No matter where we come from, or what we look like, or what battles we've fought. Aurelia looked at him, studying his face, as if trying to understand his words. She seemed to be weighing his honesty, deciding if she could trust him. She hadn't expected kindness from a human, But there it was, clear as day. It was a simple thing, helping her when she had nothing to offer in return. And yet it meant so much more than any weapon she could wield. "You're different from what I expected," she said softly. "I thought all humans were the same, weak, afraid of anything they don't understand. But you," she paused, as if searching for the right words. "You've proven me wrong." Nathan smiled slightly. "I guess not all humans are the same. We can be just as different as anyone else, can't we?" For the first time, Aurelia smiled back, though it was faint and hesitant, maybe. As the days passed, Nathan and Aurelia fell into a rhythm. They worked together on the farm. Though Aurelia wasn't as skilled with farming as Nathan was, she still had the instincts of a hunter. Her eyes were sharp, and her movements precise. But she struggled with tasks like planting seeds or caring for the animals. Nathan found himself teaching her the small details of farm life, things that seemed so simple to him but were new to her. She, in turn, taught him more about her species, showing him how to track animals, how to fight with a blade, and how to survive in the harshest of conditions. Despite the differences in their worlds, they found common ground in the simplest things. The quiet evenings spent together, sharing stories and meals, became a time of peace for both of them. And for the first time since Aurelia had arrived, she began to relax, though the shadow of her past still hung over her. But Nathan knew their time together wouldn't last forever. He could feel it in his bones. Really, his enemies would come, looking for her eventually. He had seen it in her eyes, the fear that she carried every time she heard a strange noise or saw a shadow in the distance. Nathan didn't know what would happen when they came, but he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change once again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cool air settled over the farm, Nathan and Aurelia sat together, watching the stars. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Aurelia broke the silence. "I should leave," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The longer I stay here, the more danger you'll be in." Nathan looked at her, his heart heavy. "No," he said firmly, "you're staying here. You're not alone." Aurelia didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars, her golden eyes reflecting the light of distant worlds. "I've always been alone," she said softly. "But maybe it's time I stopped running." Nathan smiled, his heart swelling with something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it is. And though neither of them knew what the future held, they both knew one thing for certain: they were no longer alone. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between Nathan and Aurelia grew stronger with each passing moment. What had begun as an act of kindness from Nathan had blossomed into something neither of them had expected. The quiet farm, once a place of solitude, had become a place of companionship, a place where two very different beings could find a sense of peace. Nathan had grown used to Aurelia's presence. At first, she had been a stranger, a wounded alien who needed help. Now, she was someone he trusted. He found himself looking forward to the mornings when they worked together. There was something calming about the way she handled the tools, the way her sharp eyes noticed things he often missed. She was strong, capable, and had an energy that was infectious. Aurelia, on the other hand, was starting to feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. She had spent most of her life in the midst of battle, never knowing what it was like to live in peace. Every time she had fought, she had done so with the belief that survival was all that mattered. But now, with Nathan, she found herself thinking about a future, something beyond the endless war and the constant running. One afternoon, as they sat in the shade of a large tree near the barn, Nathan handed Aurelia a small bowl of fruit he had picked from the orchard. She accepted it with a quiet nod, still not used to the gentle acts of kindness that Nathan often offered her. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "You always make sure I have enough to eat." Nathan smiled, a little shy. "Well, I can't have you starving after everything I've done for you." Aurelia chuckled, a sound that was rare for her but warm nonetheless. "I never thought I would meet someone like you, Nathan. Someone willing to help a stranger like me." Nathan looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "I don't know. I guess I just can't ignore someone in need. It's just who I am." Aurelia studied him for a moment, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "You don't look at me like I'm a monster or a threat." Nathan frowned. "Why would I?" She hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "Where I come from, people fear my kind. They see us as warriors, dangerous and violent. I've never known a place where someone would welcome me without question." Nathan's heart ached for her. "I'm sorry you've been treated like that. No one should feel like they don't belong." Aurelia lowered her gaze to the ground, her fingers absent-mindedly twisting the edge of her sleeve. "You don't understand. My people, we're not like you. We've fought wars for centuries, and we've been taught that only the strongest survive. Compassion is seen as weakness." Nathan's heart sank as he listened. He had no idea what it was like to live in a world ruled by survival and war. His life, despite its hardships, had always been peaceful in comparison. The farm had never known war, and the worst thing he'd had to face was a bad crop season or the occasional storm. "I'm sorry," he said again, feeling the weight of her words. "I can't imagine what that must be like for you." Aurelia remained silent for a long while. The air around them was thick with unspoken thoughts, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Nathan simply waited, knowing that the time would come when she was ready to speak. Finally, she looked up, her eyes meeting his. "It's strange, she said quietly. "I've been taught to fight and to never show weakness. But when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to be strong all the time." Nathan smiled gently. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Aurelia. You're safe here. I'll make sure of that." The sincerity in his voice seemed to break through the walls she had built around herself. For the first time, Aurelia felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away. "You're not like the others," she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never had anyone care about me like this." Nathan reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Aurelia looked down at their hands, her mind racing. For so long, she had been alone, either fighting, running, or hiding. The idea of belonging, of being cared for, was foreign to her. But now, with Nathan, she was beginning to understand what it meant to truly live, not just survive. That evening, as they sat together in the fading light of the day, Nathan noticed a change in Aurelia. Her posture was more relaxed, her body language less guarded. She didn't speak of it, but Nathan could see it in the way she smiled at the smallest things, like the way the wind played with the leaves in the trees or the sound of the nearby creek flowing gently through the land. For the first time, Aurelia seemed to let go of the weight she had carried for so long. The next morning, they worked together in the fields, planting new crops. Aurelia was surprisingly good at it, though she still had to learn some of the finer details. Nathan noticed that she was eager to learn, always asking questions and listening carefully to his instructions. It was a small thing, but it made him realize how much she had adapted to the new life she was beginning to build. As the day wore on, Nathan felt a sense of pride. He wasn't just helping Aurelia survive, he was helping her live. He had seen the hardness in her eyes when she first arrived, the distrust and the fear that had driven her to the brink of death. But now, he saw something different, something softer. Aurelia was beginning to open up to the possibility of a future that didn't involve fighting or running. By the time the sun set, Nathan felt more certain than ever that this was where he belonged. This quiet farm, with its peaceful rhythm of daily life, was no longer just his world. It was really his world now, too, and together. They were building something new, something that neither of them had ever imagined. As they sat down to dinner that night, Nathan looked across the table at Aurelia. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she smiled genuinely, without hesitation. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said softly. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Understand what?" Aurelia's smile widened just a little. "What it means to be human." Nathan chuckled, his heart light. "It's not always as simple as it seems, but I'm glad you're starting to understand." And in that moment, Nathan realized that this, whatever it was just the beginning. They were no longer just strangers from different worlds. They were becoming something more, and for the first time in a long while. Both of them believed in the possibility of a future. It had been a peaceful week on the farm. The sun was bright, and the fields were full of green, promising a good harvest. Nathan and Aurelia had settled into a steady routine, working the land by day, sharing meals by night. The barn, once a place of silence, was now filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Aurelia had become more comfortable with each passing day, and Nathan found joy in the companionship that had slowly blossomed between them. But even as they worked, there was always a sense of unease in Aurelia's eyes. She had grown fond of this quiet life, but she knew better than anyone that it wouldn't last forever. The past, with all its danger and chaos, was never too far behind. She had been hunted before, and she knew it wouldn't be long before her enemies found her. One afternoon, as Nathan worked in the field, Aurelia stood at the edge of the land, her eyes scanning the horizon. She felt a chill run down her spine as a deep, nagging feeling took hold. Something was off. The wind had shifted, and with it, a sense of danger lingered in the air. She stood still for a moment, trying to read the signs, but they were vague. A gut feeling, one that had kept her alive for years, told her that something was coming. "Nathan," Aurelia called, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to move, now." Nathan looked up from his work, startled by the fear in her voice. He dropped his tools and rushed to her side. "What's going on? What do you see?" Aurelia's eyes were narrowed, her body tense. "I don't know yet, but I feel it. We have to leave this place now." Nathan's heart raced as he looked. Around, everything seemed peaceful. The birds were singing, the animals grazing lazily, but the expression on Aurelia's face told him that something was wrong. He didn't question her. If there was danger, he trusted her instincts. "Grab what you need. I'll get the horses ready," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. Aurelia nodded and rushed into the barn, gathering a few belongings, mostly food, water, and her weapons. She wasn't sure what was coming, but she knew she needed to be ready. As she packed, her thoughts raced. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped it wouldn't be so soon. The past was catching up to her faster than she had expected. By the time Nathan had the horses ready, Aurelia had returned, her face pale but determined. She climbed onto one of the horses, her grip tight on the reins, and looked back at Nathan. "We need to go. Fast." Nathan followed suit, mounting his own horse. "Where do we go?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with worry. Aurelia looked out across the landscape, her sharp eyes scanning for any signs of movement. "We head for the hills. It's the safest place for now." They rode hard, pushing their horses to move faster, the wind whipping past them as they headed toward the distant hills. Aurelia kept her eyes on the horizon, constantly alert, while Nathan tried to keep up with her pace. His heart pounding, every part of him wanted to ask more questions, to understand what was going on, but he knew better than to distract her. She had been through much more than he had, and right now, her knowledge was their only guide. As they reached the base of the hills, Aurelia slowed her horse and turned to face Nathan. "We need to find shelter. I'll scout ahead." Nathan nodded, but there was no hiding the concern in his eyes. "Are you sure? What if I'll be fine?" She interrupted, her tone firm. "Stay here. Keep the horses hidden." Nathan watched as she dismounted and began to move into the brush, blending seamlessly into the trees and undergrowth. He couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as he waited. The silence in the hills was unsettling. The world seemed still. Too still. Minutes passed like hours. Nathan kept his eyes on the spot where Aurelia had disappeared, his nerves on edge. He knew she was capable, but the thought of something happening to her filled him with dread. What if her enemies had already found them? What if they were too late? Just as he was about to mount his horse and search for her, Aurelia emerged from the trees. Her face grim, she moved swiftly, returning to the side. "We're not alone," she said quietly. Nathan's heart sank. "What do you mean, I saw them?" Aurelia replied, her voice tense. "A group of soldiers, not far from here. They're looking for me." Nathan's chest tightened with fear. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Aurelia said. We need to move, now." Without another word, they turned their horses and began to ride deeper into the hills. The landscape here was rocky, with narrow paths that wound between jagged cliffs and dense trees. It was difficult terrain, but Aurelia knew it well. She had used this land to her advantage in the past, and she intended to do so again. As they rode, Nathan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. He didn't fully understand who was after Aurelia, or why they were so determined to find her. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. She had shown him kindness when no one else would, and now it was his turn to protect her. They rode for hours, stopping only when it was too dark to continue. Aurelia found them a small cave nestled between two large rocks, hidden from view. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for the night. As they settled in, Nathan couldn't help but ask the question that had been on his mind. Since Aurelia first spoke of her enemies, who are they? What do they want with you? Aurelia paused, her gaze distant as she thought of how to explain. They are part of a faction that seeks control over my people's land. They want to use us as soldiers, as weapons. I've been a target for a long time now. Nathan's stomach tightened at her words. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to live with that kind of threat hanging over you every day. He looked at her, his voice soft. I won't let them hurt you, I promise. Aurelia met his gaze, her golden eyes filled with something she hadn't shown him before: trust. Thank you, Nathan, she said quietly. I don't know how I would have made it this far without you. Nathan reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. You don't have to face this alone. We'll get through this together. And in that moment, despite the danger that loomed over them, both of them felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but they weren't alone anymore. The night was long and cold. Nathan and Aurelia huddled together in the cave, listening for any sign of movement outside. The silence was unnerving, but Aurelia kept her senses sharp. The flickering light from the small fire they had made cast shadows on the walls, and every sound seemed magnified in the stillness. Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The enemy was getting closer. Every moment spent hiding in this cave felt like a risk. Aurelia sat close to the fire, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She had always been a warrior, taught to fight and survive. But sitting here, far from the life she had known, made her feel vulnerable. She couldn't shake the fear of being caught, of leading Nathan into danger. He had done so much for her already. He had protected her when she needed it most. The last thing she wanted was for him to be hurt because of her. Nathan sat across from her, watching the fire dance. His face was lined with worry, but his expression was calm, steady. He didn't show it, but he was scared too. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let anything happen to Aurelia. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. Aurelia, Nathan said softly, breaking the silence. Do you think they'll come tonight? She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered the question. It's possible. They know I'm here. I've been running for days, and they've been tracking me. Nathan's heart tightened. How long will it take for them to find us? Aurelia shook her head. I don't know. It could be days, or it could be sooner. But they won't stop. They never stop. Nathan nodded, his thoughts racing. He knew. Aurelia was right. Her enemies were relentless. But they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan, a way to fight back. Then we need to make sure we're ready, Nathan said, his voice firm. We can't just hide forever. Aurelia's eyes flickered with something close to admiration. You're brave, she said, quietly. But this isn't your fight. It's mine. I don't care about that, Nathan replied, his tone soft but strong. I promise you I wouldn't let anything happen to you, and I'm not going to break that promise. Aurelia looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. She could see the determination in his eyes, the fierce loyalty that had grown between them. It was more than just the kindness he had shown her. It was the way he believed in her, in them, and for the first time in a long while, Aurelia felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Nathan smiled, though it was tinged with worry. We're in this together, and together we'll figure it out. The following day, Aurelia led Nathan further into the hills, away from the cave. She had been here before, but this time she was more determined than ever. They couldn't afford to sit and wait. They needed to act as they walked. Aurelia showed Nathan how to move quietly through the terrain, teaching him how to track, how to find cover, and how to use the natural landscape to their advantage. Nathan was quick to learn, and soon they were moving with a confidence they hadn't had before. They were no longer just running, they were preparing to fight. That afternoon, as they made their way through a dense thicket of trees, Aurelia suddenly held up her hand, signaling for Nathan to stop. She listened intently, her sharp ears picking up the faint sound of movement in the distance. Nathan stood still, his heart pounding in his chest. Aurelia's eyes narrowed as she scanned the surroundings, her every sense on high alert. The enemy was close. "They're here," she whispered. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense of danger that was now closing in on them. They couldn't outrun this. They had to fight. Aurelia turned to him, her eyes steady and focused. "I'll handle this," she said, her voice calm but filled with authority. Nathan shook his head. "No, we'll do this together." Aurelia hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She had trained her whole life for moments like this, but she couldn't deny that Nathan's presence gave her strength. He was no warrior, but he had a courage that even she admired. They quickly found a spot to hide, crouching low behind a cluster of rocks. Aurelia's eyes were sharp as she surveyed the area, waiting for the enemy to make their move. Minutes passed in silence. The tension between them was palpable, both of them aware that the smallest sound could give them away. Then, through the trees, a group of heavily armed soldiers appeared, moving cautiously as they searched for any sign of Aurelia. Nathan's heart raced as he saw them. They were bigger than he expected, armed with weapons that looked far more advanced than anything he had ever seen. He could see the determination in their eyes, the way they moved as one unit, ready to strike. Aurelia placed a hand on his arm, her fingers steady. "Stay low," she whispered. "Let me take care of this." Nathan nodded, his grip tightening on the small blade she had given him earlier. He had never held a weapon before, but in this moment, he understood its purpose. He wasn't a fighter, but he would do whatever it took to protect Aurelia. As the soldiers drew closer, Aurelia moved silently, slipping between the trees like a shadow. Nathan watched in awe as she approached the group, her movements graceful and deadly. She was a hunter, and this was her domain. The soldiers didn't stand a chance. With swift precision, Aurelia took down the first soldier, her blade flashing in the dim light. The other soldiers reacted quickly, but they were no match for her speed and skill. Nathan could barely keep up with the action, but he could see the way Aurelia fought, each move deliberate, each strike calculated. Within minutes, the fight was over. The soldiers lay defeated, and the farce was once again silent. Aurelia stood over them, breathing heavily but with a sense of calm resolve. She had done it. She had protected them both. Nathan slowly stood, his heart still racing. "That was amazing," he said, his voice filled with awe. Aurelia turned to him, a faint smile crossing her lips. "It's nothing," she said softly, "just survival." But Nathan knew it was more than that. Aurelia was more than just a warrior. She was someone who had survived against all odds. And now, she had someone by her side who would fight with her, no matter what. "We did it," Nathan said, his voice steady now. Aurelia met his gaze, her eyes full of respect. Together, she agreed, and in that moment, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it as allies, as friends. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to their story than just survival. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the hills. Nathan and Aurelia sat near a small campfire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows around them. They had traveled far from the farm, moving deeper into the wilderness, away from the threat that had followed them for so long. But even in this remote corner of the world, they both knew they weren't safe. The soldiers they had defeated were only a small part of the force hunting Aurelia. The real danger was still out there, waiting to strike. Nathan looked at Aurelia, her face lit by the firelight, her expression thoughtful. The journey had changed them both. What started as an act of kindness had turned into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. Nathan had never imagined that helping an alien woman would lead him into a fight for survival. But here they were, facing enemies far stronger and more dangerous than anything he had ever encountered. And yet, despite the danger, he felt more alive than ever. Aurelia had always been a warrior, her life shaped by battles and survival. But in Nathan's company, she had learned something new. She had learned that survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about trust, about finding someone who would stand by you when the world was against you. She had never imagined she would find that in a human. Yet, here they were, bound together by a bond stronger than anything she had known. "I've never had someone watch my back before," Aurelia said quietly, her voice almost lost in the wind. "Not like this." Nathan turned to look at her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "I've always fought alone," she explained, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "I've always had to rely on myself. But with you, I don't feel like I'm fighting alone anymore." Nathan smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "You're not alone anymore, Aurelia. I promised I'd protect you, and I meant it." Aurelia looked at him, her gaze softening. She had learned to trust him in ways she never thought possible. Nathan was not just a human. He was a partner, someone who understood her pain and fear, and someone who was willing to stand by her, no matter the cost. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "We've come a long way. But the fight's not over yet. We need to figure out what we're going to do next." Aurelia sat back, her mind racing. She knew they couldn't keep running forever. The soldiers would regroup and come after them again. They needed to plan something to end this once and for all. But what could they do? She wasn't sure, but she knew that whatever they decided, it had to be done together. "I've been thinking," Aurelia said, breaking the silence. "If we're going to defeat them, we need to hit them where it hurts. We need to take out their command, the people who are pulling the strings." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You think we can do that?" Aurelia's expression hardened. "We don't have a choice. They won't stop until they have me. But if we destroy their leadership, we can weaken them, maybe even turn the tide." Nathan's heart raced. He had never thought about going on the offensive. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. They couldn't keep hiding forever. It was time to take a stand. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "How do we do it?" Aurelia thought for a moment. "We need to gather information. Find out where their leaders are, how many soldiers they have, and what resources they're using. If we can learn that, we can plan our attack." Nathan nodded. "And what about the people they've hurt? The ones who are suffering because of them?" Aurelia's expression softened. "We'll save them too. We'll take down their operation and free those who are trapped." Nathan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "Then let's do it. We'll end this." The next few days were spent gathering information. Aurelia used her skills as a hunter to track down scouts and soldiers who were searching for her. Nathan helped her blend into the landscape, using his knowledge of the terrain to find hidden paths and secret routes. Together, they managed to gather enough information to form a plan. They learned that the enemy's leadership was stationed in a nearby fortress, a heavily guarded stronghold that was nearly impenetrable. But they also discovered a weakness, a secret passage that led into the heart of the fortress. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The night before their attack, Nathan and Aurelia sat by the campfire again, preparing for what lay ahead. They were quiet, each lost in their thoughts, knowing that tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. There would be no turning back. "I'm scared," Nathan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if we don't make it?" Aurelia turned to him, her eyes steady. "We'll make it. We've already come this far. Together." Nathan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about trust. About standing together when the world seemed against them. They had already faced so much, and they had survived. They had each other. That was all they needed. "I'm ready," Nathan said finally, his voice stronger now. Aurelia nodded. "Tomorrow, We take them down. The next day, they set out for the fortress. The air was thick with tension, but they didn't speak much. They had a job to do, and there was no room for distractions. As they approached the fortress, they found the secret passage and entered undetected. The passage was narrow and dark, but Aurelia moved through it with ease, her senses sharp. Nathan followed closely behind, his heart pounding in his chest. They reached the heart of the fortress and found the enemy leaders gathered in a large room, discussing their next move. Aurelia and Nathan exchanged a quick glance. It was now or never. They burst into the room, catching the leaders by surprise. Aurelia's blade flashed, taking down the first soldier before he could even react. Nathan followed her lead, his hand steady despite the fear in his chest. They fought with everything they had, the sound of battle filling the air. In the end, they stood victorious. The enemy was defeated, and the leadership was no more. The fortress, once a symbol of oppression, was now a symbol of freedom. Nathan turned to Aurelia, his chest heaving with exhaustion. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Aurelia looked at him, her eyes shining with a fierce pride. "We did it, together." And in that moment, as they stood in the heart of the fortress, they knew that they had not only defeated their enemies, they had changed the course of their own lives. The fight was over, but their journey was just beginning.